Kiwu Park stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council. The ceiling stretched high above him, covered in stars that showed the positions of 847 different worlds. Each star represented a species that belonged to the Council. Each species had a voice in deciding what happened in the galaxy, all except one. Kiwu looked around the hall. Thousands of alien beings filled the seats. Some looked like giant insects. Others looked like walking rocks. Some were just clouds of gas floating in metal suits. They came in every shape and size that life could take. But they all had one thing in common. They all looked down on humans. "Ambassador Park," said the voice of High Consul Velnash. The Altarian's voice sounded like wind blowing through broken glass. "You will explain why your species continues to fail in the Void Plague." Containment. Kiwu felt his jaw tighten. 300 years. For 300 years, humans had served the Council. They had fought wars that other species would not fight. They had explored dangerous places that other species would not explore. They had died protecting worlds that belonged to species who would not even say thank you. "High Consul," Kiwu said. He kept his voice calm. "We have lost 40,000 human soldiers in the past 6 months. They died protecting your worlds from the Void Plague. They died so that your people could live." A sound like static filled the hall. It was alien laughter. "Acceptable losses," said Counselor Krixtal. The Silicon Collective member's voice came from speakers in its crystal body. "Humans breed quickly. You can make more soldiers." More laughter filled the hall. Kiwu felt something cold and hard settle in his stomach. Behind him, he heard Hyen Choi take a sharp breath. She was the human military liaison. She had friends, among those 40,000 dead soldiers. "Perhaps," said another voice, "we should discuss the real problem." Kiwu turned to see Counselor Zethmar of the Hegemony float forward. The gas being's containment suit gleamed under the hall's lights. "The real problem," Zethmar continued, "is that humans are genetically violent. You cannot help but fight and destroy. This makes you useful for certain tasks, but it also makes you dangerous." "Dangerous to whom?" Kiwu asked. "To proper civilization," said High Consul Velnash. "Your species has no real culture, no art worth studying, no philosophy worth hearing. You exist to serve those who are better than you. You should be grateful for this opportunity." Kiwu looked around the hall again. He saw alien faces looking at him with expressions he had learned to read over the years. Contempt, disgust, amusement. Not one face showed respect. Not one showed gratitude. He thought about the human colonies on the outer rim. Small worlds where people worked hard to build something good. He thought about human artists creating beautiful music and paintings. He thought about human scientists making discoveries that had helped every species in the Council. He thought about human engineers building things that other species said were impossible. Then he thought about his daughter Min Jung, who was studying to be a doctor. She wanted to help people, all people, human and alien alike. What would these Council members say about her dreams? What would they say about her worth? "You speak of genetic violence," Kiwu said. His voice was still calm, but something had changed in it. "Let me tell you about genetic violence." The hall grew quiet. When the Drakon plague swept through the spiral arm, which species volunteered to enter the infected zones? Humans. When the void wraiths attacked the core worlds, which species flew suicide missions to save your people? Humans. When the quantum storms threatened to tear apart reality itself, which species went into the storms to repair the damage? Humans. Kiwu stepped forward. "You call us violent, but we have never started a war of conquest. We have never enslaved another species. We have never claimed that we were better than others just because we were born different. Every war we have fought for this Council has been to protect someone else. Every life we have lost has been lost saving lives that belong to species who think we are beneath them." "This is exactly what we mean," said Krixtal. "You are emotional. You cannot think clearly. This is why you cannot be trusted with important decisions." "Important decisions?" Kiwu laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Like the decision to send 40,000 humans to die fighting a plague that your own scientists created by accident?" Like the decision to build colonies on worlds where only humans can survive the radiation. Like the decision to explore the dark zone where 300 human ships have vanished. Those are necessary sacrifices, said Velnash. The needs of advanced civilization must come before the comfort of lesser species. Kaiwu felt something break inside him. It was not anger exactly. It was something colder and more final. I see, he said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. Every alien in the hall recognized it. It was a formal declaration, tablet. When an ambassador used it, they spoke for their entire species. By the power given to me by the United Earth Government and the Colonial Council, Kiwu said, I formally withdraw humanity from the Galactic Council. This withdrawal is effective immediately and is not subject to appeal or revision. The hall exploded into noise. Aliens shouted in a dozen different languages. Some laughed, some seemed angry, some seemed worried. You cannot do this, said Velnash. Your species depends on the Council for everything, your technology, your trade routes, your protection. Without us, you will fall back into the primitive state where we found you. We will see, said Kiwu. Suddenly, the hall's security system activated. Red lights flashed. The great doors sealed shut. Armed guards began moving toward Kiwu. Ambassador, Park, said a mechanical voice. You are under arrest for violation of Cosmic Order Statute 847C. Surrender immediately. Kiwu did not move. He looked around the hall one more time. For 300 years, he said, we believed that the galaxy was big enough for all of us. We believed that if we worked hard and proved our worth, you would accept us as equals. We were wrong. The guards were getting closer. Kiwu could see their weapons charging. Heian, he said quietly. Yes, sir, came her voice from behind him. Execute. Withdrawal Protocol 7. With pleasure, sir. Suddenly, the air around Kiwu shimmered. A transport beam had locked onto him, but it was not from the Council's security forces. Transport in progress, said a familiar voice over Kiwu's communicator. It was Captain Sohee Bay from the human ship Defiance. All human personnel, prepare for immediate extraction. The aliens in the hall began to panic. They had not expected this. They had thought humans were too primitive to have technology that could break through Council security. As Kiwu began to fade from view, he spoke one last time. You taught us that in this galaxy, only the strong survive. Thank you for that lesson. We will remember it. Then he was gone. All around the galaxy, similar scenes played out. Human ambassadors vanished from their posts. Human scientists abandoned their research. Human engineers left their projects half-finished. Human doctors walked away from alien patients they had been treating for years. In the outer rim, human colonies went dark. Their communication systems shut down. Their trade routes closed. Their defensive fleets disappeared into the void. On Earth, President Chang Min-an addressed the planet. My fellow humans, he said, today we begin a new chapter in our history. For too long we have allowed others to define our worth. For too long we have accepted scraps from the table of galactic civilization. No more. We are leaving. All of us. Every human in Council space will return to our own worlds. We will build our own civilization. We will make our own rules, and we will see who truly needs whom. In the Council Hall, the aliens slowly realized what had happened. High Consul Velnash tried to open communication channels with human worlds. All he got was silence. This is temporary, he announced. They will be back within a month. They cannot survive without our technology and protection. But Counselor Crystal was already running calculations. Humans made up less than 1% of the galaxy's population. But they did more than 50% of the dangerous work. They maintained critical systems on thousands of worlds. They grew food that fed entire sectors. They provided medical care in places where no other species could work. High Consul, Crystal said, we may have made an error. Nonsense, said Velnash. They are primitive. They need us more than we need them. 6 months later, Velnash would remember those words. He would remember them as he watched the first alien worlds begin to starve. He would remember them as critical systems failed across the galaxy, He would remember them as the first reports came in of something dark and hungry, stirring in the void between stars. But that was still in the future. For now, the council members congratulated themselves on being rid of the troublesome humans. They did not notice that the lights in the hall were already starting to flicker. The human technicians who maintained the power systems had been the first to leave. In the darkness between stars, human ships gathered in secret locations. They had work to do. They had a new civilization to build, and they had a galaxy to teach about the true meaning of strength. The universe was about to learn a hard lesson about taking things for granted, and the humans who had spent 3 centuries being taken for granted were about to become its teachers. Kiwoo Park stood on the bridge of the. Dr. So-Young Lim stood in her small garden on the human colony of New Busan. 6 months had passed since the great departure from council space. The tomatoes she had planted were growing well in the alien soil. She had mixed earth seeds with soil samples from 12 different worlds. It was the kind of experiment that the council's scientists had called primitive guesswork, but the tomatoes were growing. Her communicator buzzed. She looked at the message and sighed. It was from Dr. Thexmore, the crystalline entity who had replaced her as the council's chief xenobiologist. Dr. Lim, the message said, we are experiencing difficulties with the agricultural programs you initiated. The modified crops on Kepler-7 are failing. The soil enhancement bacteria on Vega-3 have stopped reproducing. The livestock on 12 worlds are becoming sick and dying. We need your research data immediately. So Young deleted the message without answering. It was the 15th such message she had received this month. Each one was more desperate than the last. She walked to her computer and called up the reports she had been tracking. The picture they painted was not pretty. Food production in council space was down 30%. On some worlds, it was down by half. The crystalline entities who had taken over her research projects were brilliant at following instructions. But they could not adapt when something unexpected happened. And in biology, unexpected things happened every day. On Kepler-7, the modified grain crops were dying because the local weather patterns had shifted. So-Young had designed the modifications to be flexible. They could adapt to small changes in temperature and rainfall. But Thexmore had improved the modifications to be more efficient. In doing so, he had removed their ability to adapt. So-Young had tried to warn him. She had sent detailed notes explaining why the flexibility was important. Thexmore had dismissed her warnings as human imprecision. Now entire harvests were rotting in the fields. Her communicator buzzed again. This time it was a message from her friend Dong Hyun Nam, who was working as an engineer on New Seoul. So-Young, his message said, you need to see the latest reports from council space. It's worse than we thought. So-Young opened the files Dong Hyun had sent. They were intelligence. Reports gathered by human agents who had remained in council space. The reports painted a picture of a civilization slowly falling apart. On the industrial world of Keras-7, 3 plasma refineries had exploded in the past month. Dong-Hyun had designed those refineries to be safe and efficient, but more importantly, he had built them to be flexible. When cosmic radiation patterns shifted, the refineries could adapt their operations. The Kerasan engineers who had replaced Dong-Hyun were excellent at following his technical manuals. They could maintain the refineries perfectly under normal conditions, but when the radiation patterns shifted, they had no idea how to adapt. They had tried to contact Dong-Hyun for help, but he was no longer answering their calls. So-Young read through more reports. The pattern was the same everywhere. Human doctors had been replaced by alien medical specialists who could not treat diseases they had never seen before. Human explorers had been replaced by alien teams who followed safety protocols so strictly that they could not adapt when they encountered unexpected dangers. The most devastating report came from the Frontier Medical Corps. Dr. Jin Ho Kwan had led a team of human medics who specialized in treating exotic diseases. They had been the only ones willing to work in the dangerous frontier regions where new diseases appeared regularly. Without them, first contact missions with new species had become disasters. Alien immune systems that had never encountered human pathogens were dying in large numbers. and humans who might have been able to help were now thousands of light years away, building their own civilization. So Young finished reading the reports and sat back in her chair. She felt a mixture of sadness and satisfaction. She was sad that innocent beings were suffering, but she was satisfied that the Council was finally learning the truth about human value. Her communicator buzzed again. This time it was a priority. Message from Captain Eugene Seo, who had commanded the defense fleet protecting the spiral trade routes. So Young, the message said. I thought you should know. Pirates hit another convoy in the spiral routes yesterday. 23 ships destroyed. 400 alien crew members killed. The Council fleet that was supposed to protect them arrived 6 hours too late. So Young closed her eyes. Eugene had protected those trade routes for 15 years. She had known every asteroid, every hiding place, every trick that pirates might use. She could move her small fleet of human ships like pieces on a chessboard, always staying one step ahead of the enemy. The 5 alien commanders who had replaced her were individually excellent military officers, but they could not work together. They spent more time arguing about tactics than they spent fighting pirates. What had once been routine patrol duties now required massive military operations. Another message arrived. This one was from analyst Yoon-ji Ko, who was working for Human Intelligence Services. The Council is starting to panic, Yoon-ji's message said. Supreme Counselor Rathvan issued a statement today claiming that the problems are temporary. He says that advanced alien civilization will adapt and overcome. But my sources inside the Council say that some members are already talking about offering humans incentives to return. So Young smiled at that. Incentives. Not apologies. Not acknowledgement that they had been wrong. Just incentives, as if humans were mercenaries who could be bought. She walked back to her garden and looked at the tomatoes again. They were growing in soil that Council scientists had said was too acidic for earth plants. But So Young had found a way to make it work. She had combined human intuition with alien soil science to create something new. That was what humans did. They adapted. They found ways to make things work that should not work. They solved problems that other species said were impossible. The Council had never understood that. They had seen human adaptability as a weakness, not a strength. They had wanted humans to follow rules and procedures, not to think for themselves. Now, they were learning what happened when you removed adaptability from a complex system. Everything started to break down. Her communicator buzzed one more time. This message was from President Chung Min-an himself. Dr. Lim, the message said, I know you are receiving many requests for help from your former colleagues in Council, Space. I want you to know that the decision about how to respond is yours to make. We will not order you to help them, and we will not order you to refuse. Whatever you decide, the human government will support you. So Young appreciated that. The human government was not making the same mistake the Council had made. They were not treating their people as tools to be used without thought for their own wishes. She thought about Thexmore and his increasingly desperate messages. She thought about the crops dying on Kepler 7. She thought about the medical emergencies in the frontier regions. Then she thought about the Council members who had laughed when Ambassador Kiwoo Park had spoken about human sacrifices. She thought about the voices that had called humans genetically violent and primitive. So Young made her decision. She sat down at her computer and composed a message to Dr. Thexmore. Dr. Thexmore, she wrote, you are correct that you need my research data to solve your agricultural problems. However, that research data represents 30 years of work by human scientists. It includes insights and innovations that only humans have developed. You dismissed our methods as primitive. You claimed that your crystalline logic was superior to human intuition. You were wrong. Our methods work because they account for the unexpected. Your methods fail because they assume everything will always go according to plan. If you want our help, you will need to admit that you were wrong. You will need to acknowledge that human science has value. And you will need to treat us as equals, not as servants. Until that happens, you are welcome to try to solve these problems using your own superior methods. I wish you luck, you will need it. So Young sent the message and went back to her garden. The tomatoes were doing well. So were the peppers she had planted next to them, and the beans she had trained to grow up stakes made from local wood. It was a small garden on a small colony world, but it was proof that humans could thrive anywhere. They could take the worst soil and make it productive. They could take the harshest conditions and find a way to survive. The council had forgotten that survival was about more than just following rules. It was about adapting when the rules no longer worked. It was about finding new solutions when old solutions failed. Humans had been adapting for millions of years. They had survived ice ages and disasters. They had spread from one small planet to hundreds of worlds across the galaxy. They had done it by being flexible, creative, and willing to try new things. The council species had achieved perfection in their specialties, but they had forgotten how to change. And now the galaxy was changing around them, and they did not know how to adapt. So Young's tomatoes would keep growing. The human colonies would keep expanding. And somewhere in council space, alien civilizations would keep struggling with problems they did not know how to solve. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson about the value of adaptability. And the humans who had been dismissed as primitive were proving that. Admiral Taemin Lee stood on the bridge of his flagship, indomitable, watching the long-range sensors. 2 years had passed since humanity left the council. 2 years of building new colonies, new ships, new lives far from the aliens who had treated them as servants. But today the sensors showed something that made his blood run cold. "Admiral," said his sensor officer, Lieutenant Ji-Won Park, "we're detecting massive energy signatures from the void. Something big is moving toward council space." Taemin studied the readings. He had seen energy signatures like this before, but only in ancient historical records. The readings matched descriptions of a threat that the galaxy had not seen for 10,000 years. "The Devourers," he said quietly. Every human on the bridge knew that name. The Devourers were an ancient machine race that had once consumed entire sectors of the galaxy. They had been defeated long ago, before humans had even developed spaceflight. But legend said they had not been destroyed, only driven back into the dark spaces between galaxies. Now they were returning. "Sir," said Communications Officer Hai-Jin Choi, "we're receiving emergency broadcast from Council Space. Multiple star. Systems have gone dark in the past week. The Council is calling it a technical malfunction, but the patterns match Devourer attack methods." Taemin nodded grimly. The Council was probably trying to avoid panic. They would not want to admit that they faced a threat they could not handle alone. "Any word from the Council military?" he asked. "Yes, sir. Fleet Admiral Corkston has issued mobilization orders to all Council fleets. They're trying to form a defensive line at the Perseus Junction." Taemin almost laughed. The Perseus Junction was a poor choice for a defensive line against Devourers. The machine entities could punch through traditional fleet formations like paper. They adapted to enemy tactics within hours. Fighting them required flexibility, creativity, and the willingness to try desperate measures, all things that Council military doctrine discouraged. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Park, "the Council fleets are taking defensive positions. They're following standard formation protocols." Taemin watched the tactical display as dozens of alien ships moved into neat, organized formations. They looked impressive. But he knew that impressive formations meant nothing against an enemy that could learn and adapt faster than you could think. "How long until the Devourers reach the Perseus Junction?" he asked. "At current speed, approximately 72 hours, sir." Taemin felt a familiar weight settle on his shoulders. For 30 years he had served the Council military. He had fought alongside alien crews. He had saved alien worlds. Many of those aliens had treated him with respect, even if their governments had not. Now those same aliens were about to face an enemy that would destroy everything they had built. And they were going to face it using tactics that were guaranteed to fail. "Sir," said Hyojin, "we're receiving a priority message from New Seoul. It's from Ambassador Min Seo-yoon." "Put it through," Taemin said. Min Seo's face appeared on the main screen. She looked tired. The past 2 years had been hard work, building a new government for humanity's independent colonies. "Admiral Lee," she said, "I'm sure you've seen the reports about the Devourers. The Council has sent us an official request for military assistance. Taemin was not surprised. When humans had been part of the council, they had been the ones called upon for every dangerous mission. Now that humanity was independent, the council still expected them to come running when trouble appeared. What was the nature of their request? He asked. They want us to place our fleets under council command for the duration of the emergency. They promise to consider giving us better treatment in the future. This time, Taemin did laugh. Even facing extinction, the council could not bring itself to treat humans as equals. What are your orders, Ambassador? He asked. Mincio was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was sad but firm. The Human Colonial Senate has voted. We will not place our fleets under council command. We will not return to being their servants, even to save them from their own mistakes. Taemin nodded. He had expected that answer, but he had also expected what came next. However, Mincio continued, the Senate has also voted to provide humanitarian assistance to refugee populations. If council worlds fall to the Devourers, we will accept civilian evacuees. And Admiral, the Senate has given you discretionary authority to assist in evacuation operations if you judge them necessary. The connection ended. Taemin looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They all understood what they had just heard. Officially, humanity would not help the council. Fight the Devourers. Unofficially, Admiral Taemin Lee could do whatever he thought was right. Admiral, said Lieutenant Park, the Devourers have engaged the forward council scout fleets. The scouts are being destroyed. Taemin watched the tactical display as red markers appeared and disappeared. Each red marker represented a ship full of living beings. Each disappearance meant that hundreds or thousands of aliens had just died. Many of those aliens had probably never even heard of humans. They certainly had never voted to treat humans badly. They were just following orders, fighting for their homes and families. Sir, said Captain Boram Kim, his tactical officer, the Council is requesting detailed intelligence on Devourer capabilities. They want to know our assessment of enemy strengths and weaknesses. Do we have that information? Taemin asked. Yes, sir. Humans fought the Devourers during the Frontier Wars 300 years ago. We lost a lot of ships, but we learned their patterns. Human tactical doctrine was partially developed to counter Devourer strategies. That was something the Council had never understood. Humans had not developed their flexible tactics because they were chaotic. They had developed them because they had faced enemies that could not be defeated using rigid strategies. Send them the tactical intelligence, Taemin ordered. Mark it as humanitarian assistance. Yes, sir. Taemin continued watching the sensor displays. The main Devourer fleet was still moving toward the Perseus Junction. It was huge, bigger than anything the galaxy had seen in living memory. Admiral, said Hyojin, we're receiving emergency signals from civilian populations in the outer systems. They're requesting evacuation assistance. Which systems? Taemin asked. Altair 3, Vega Prime, and the Centauri colonies. Combined population approximately 12 million. Taemin felt the weight on his shoulders grow heavier. 12 million lives, many of them probably children who had never hurt anyone. Do we have ships available for evacuation operations? He asked. The transport fleet is standing by, said Captain Kim. We can begin evacuations immediately. But sir, added Lieutenant Park, if we commit our transports to evacuation, we won't have them available for our own defense if the Devourers break through Council lines. Taemin looked at the tactical display again. The Council fleets were taking their positions at the Perseus Junction. They looked confident, but Taemin had studied Devourer tactics. He knew how this battle would go. The Council would fight bravely. They would follow their tactical manuals perfectly, and they would lose. When they lost, the Devourers would continue toward the core worlds. They would consume everything in their path, and eventually they would reach human space, unless someone stopped them. Admiral, said Communications Officer Hyojin, we're receiving a personal message from Fleet Admiral Korksthan of the Council. Forces. Put it through. The face that appeared on screen belonged to a hegemony warrior. Admiral Korksthan had fought alongside humans many times during border conflicts. He was one of the few alien officers who had always treated human crews with respect. "Admiral Lee," Corkston said, "I know that our governments are no longer allies. I know that the Council treated your people badly. But I am asking you personally, as one soldier to another, please help us." Corkston's voice was steady, but Taemin could see the fear in his eyes. "Our tactical simulations show that we cannot defeat the Devourers using conventional methods," Corkston continued. "We need the kind of flexible thinking that only humans possess. We need the adaptability that we were too proud to value when we had it." The message ended. Taemin stared at the blank screen for a long moment. "Sir?" said Captain Kim. "What are your orders?" Taemin thought about the 12 million civilians who needed evacuation. He thought about Admiral Corkston and the alien crews who were about to face an enemy they could not defeat. He thought about the Devourers and what would happen if they were not stopped. He also thought about Ambassador Ki-Woo Park and the moment when humanity had walked away from 3 centuries of servitude. He thought about the human colonies that were finally free to build their own future. "Send a message to the evacuation fleet," he said finally. "Begin civilian evacuations immediately. Priority goes to families with children." "Yes, sir." "And send a message to Admiral Corkston. Tell him that while humanity will not place our fleets under Council command, we are willing to provide tactical consultation on a ship-to-ship basis." "Sir," said Lieutenant Park, "should we inform New Seoul of your decision?" Taemin shook his head. "Ambassador Yoon gave me discretionary authority. This is my decision to make." He looked at the sensor display one more time. The Devourers were 60 hours away from the Perseus Junction. The Council fleets were in position, and somewhere between. Field Marshal Jae-sung. Oh stood in the command center of New Seoul, watching the holographic display that showed the entire galaxy. Red markers indicated systems that had gone dark. In the past month, there had been too many red markers to count. The Devourer War had been going on for 3 years now. 3 years of watching galactic civilization tear itself apart. 3 years of desperate messages from alien species who had once called humans primitive. "Marshal," said Intelligence Officer Soo-jin Han, "we're receiving another coded transmission from Council Space. It's from General Klextree of the Warrior Caste Hegemony." Jae-sung nodded. General Klextree had been one of the most vocal critics of human military methods. He had called human tactics undisciplined and chaotic. He had written papers about how human soldiers lacked the proper respect for military tradition. Now he was begging for help. "Put it through," Jae-sung said. The holographic display changed to show the face of a hegemony warrior. General Klextree looked older than Jae-sung remembered. His armor was scarred and his eyes were tired. "Field Marshal O," Klextree said, "I am contacting you against direct orders from the High Command. If they discover this transmission, I will be executed for treason." Jae-sung waited. He had learned that when proud aliens swallowed their pride enough to contact humans, it was usually worth listening to. "We are losing," Klextree continued. "Not just battles. We are losing the war. The Devourers adapt to our tactics faster than we can develop new ones. Our greatest victories last less than a day before they become useless." "What do you want from me, General?" Jae-sung asked. "You possess something we cannot replicate," Klextree said. "Your species calls it thinking, outside the box. We need that thinking or we all die." The transmission ended. Jae-sung stared at the display for a moment, then called up the latest intelligence reports. The picture they painted was grim. The Devourers had consumed 67 star systems. They had destroyed 4 major Council fleets and crippled 3 others. Every time the Council tried a new strategy, the Devourers learned to counter it within hours. "Marshal," said Dr. Soo-jin Hwang, the head of human xenopsychology, "I have that analysis you requested." Dr. Hwang had been studying the alien species for 30 years. She understood how they thought better than anyone. "What did you find?" Jae-sung asked. "The galactic species achieved technological supremacy through specialization," Dr. Hwang said. "Each race became perfect at one thing. The crystalline entities mastered information processing. The hegemony perfected military discipline. The Altarians achieved excellence in administration. But, Jae-sung prompted, but they lost the ability to adapt. They became so specialized that they could only solve problems that fit their specialty. When they face something new, something that doesn't fit their models, they freeze. Dr. Huang brought up a chart showing galactic military doctrine. Look at this, she said. Council military strategy is based on 300 years of fighting the same types of enemies. They have perfect tactics for fighting other galactic species. But the Devourers are not a galactic species. They're something else entirely. Jae-sung studied the chart. It was impressive. The Council had strategies for every possible scenario that their military analysts could imagine. But imagination was the key word. They could only prepare for threats they could imagine. Humans are different, Dr. Huang continued. We were dismissed as jacks of all trades, masters of none. But that adaptability is actually our greatest strength. We can find solutions to problems we've never seen before. Marshal, interrupted Communications Officer Ye Jin-moon. Urgent message from President Changmin-an. The display changed to show President An's face. He looked worried. Marshal, oh, he said. We've just received a formal communication from the Galactic Council. They're requesting immediate military assistance under the terms of the Mutual Defense Protocol. Jae-sung frowned. We're not part of the Council anymore. The Mutual Defense Protocol doesn't apply to us. That's what I told them, President Ani said. But they're claiming that the Devourer threat affects all galactic civilization, including human space. They say we have a moral obligation to help. What was your response? I told them that moral obligations work both ways. They had a moral obligation to treat us as equals when we were part of their civilization. They failed to meet that obligation. President An paused, looking tired. But Marshal, they're not the only ones contacting us. We're receiving direct appeals from individual worlds, civilian governments, refugee fleets, people who had nothing to do with Council policy but are suffering because of it. Jae-sung understood the problem. It was easy to refuse help to the Council leaders who had treated humans badly. It was harder to refuse help to innocent civilians who were about to be consumed by machine entities. What are your orders, Mr. President? Jae-sung asked. The Colonial Senate is meeting in emergency session, but I wanted to get your military assessment first. Can the Council win this war without our help? Jae-sung looked at the tactical displays showing the current state of the war. Red markers indicated Devourer forces. Blue markers showed Council fleets. There were a lot more red markers than blue ones. No, sir, he said finally. They cannot win. The Devourers are adapting faster than the Council can innovate. At current rates, Council space will be completely overrun within 6 months. And, if the Devourers consume Council space, then they'll have access to all Council technology and resources. They'll be stronger when they reach human space. President An nodded grimly. That's what I was afraid of. The Senate will make the final decision, but I think we both know what that decision will be. The transmission ended. Jae-sung turned to his staff. Begin preliminary planning for Operation Homecoming, he said. Sir? Asked Colonel Gunwoo Cho, his chief of staff. If we're going to help them, Jae-sung said, we're going to do it our way, not as their servants, but as their equals. Over the next week, messages poured in from across Council space. Some were official communications from government leaders. Others were personal appeals from individual aliens who remembered working alongside humans. The most surprising message came from Emperor Quintar VII of the Central Empire. The Emperor had never acknowledged human existence before. His empire had a strict policy against dealing with lesser species, but now his message was broadcast across the entire galaxy. Citizens of the galaxy, the Emperor said, we stand at the edge of extinction. The Devourers threaten not just our governments but our children, our future, everything we have built over thousands of years. The Emperor paused, and when he continued, his voice was different, humbler. We have made mistakes, terrible mistakes. We allowed pride to blind us to the value of others. We treated our greatest allies as servants. We called our bravest defenders primitive. Today I formally acknowledge that we were wrong. The human species has shown courage, innovation, and dedication that puts our so-called advanced civilizations to shame. They have earned the right to be treated as equals, not as tools. I call upon the Galactic Council to offer humanity full membership with equal voting rights and equal representation. I call upon all galactic species to acknowledge the debt we owe to human sacrifice and human innovation, and I call upon humanity to find it in their hearts to forgive us for our blindness. The message ended with something that had never been broadcast from the Central Empire before. An apology. President Chungmin An called an emergency session of the Colonial Senate. The debate lasted 18 hours. Some senators argued for helping unconditionally. Others argued for staying out of the war entirely. Still others wanted to negotiate for specific concessions before offering aid. In the end, the vote was close. But humanity chose to help, not because they owed the council anything, not because they wanted to return to their old status as servants, but because innocent people were dying and humans had the power to help them. We will assist in the defense of galactic civilization, President An announced, but we will do so as an independent power, not as subjects of the Council. We will coordinate our efforts with Council forces, but we will not place our fleets under Council command. And when this war is over, there will be a new order in the galaxy. One based on equality and mutual respect, not on the dominance of so-called superior species. Field Marshal Jae-Sung-Oh stood in the command center, watching his staff prepare for the largest military operation in human history. Hundreds of human ships were being recalled from colonial defense duties. Thousands of human soldiers were volunteering for combat missions, but more importantly, human tactical experts were already being dispatched to work with Council fleets. Not to take orders, but to provide the kind of flexible thinking that the Council had never valued. "Marshal," said Colonel Cho, "the first wave of tactical advisors is ready for deployment. Do you have any special instructions?" Jae-Sung thought about General Klextree and his desperate message. He thought about Admiral Korksthan, who had always treated human crews with respect. He thought about the billions of innocent civilians who had never voted to treat humans as inferior. "Tell them to remember what we're fighting for," he said. "Not for the Council that rejected us. For the people who deserve a chance to live and grow and become better than their leaders were. And tell them to show these." Task Force Commander Subin Kang stood on the bridge of her flagship, Rising Dawn, as it dropped out of hyperspace. Around her, 47 human ships materialized in perfect formation. They were returning to Council space for the first time in 3 years, but they were not returning as servants. "Commander," said Navigation Officer Wu Jin-ha, "we're receiving multiple hails from Council forces. They want to know our intentions." "Tell them we're here to help," Subin said. "But we're here as allies, not as subordinates." Through the viewport she could see the remnants of the Council's 7th Fleet. What had once been 300 ships was now reduced to barely 50. They were scattered across space, many of them showing signs of heavy damage. "Ma'am," said Tactical Officer Dae-Hai Lim, "sensors show significant devourer activity in this sector. Multiple contacts moving in coordinated patterns." Subin studied the tactical display. The devourers were using a formation she had never seen before. They were adapting again, developing new strategies to counter the Council's latest tactics. But humans had been studying devourer patterns for 3 years now. They had identified weaknesses that the rigid Council military had missed. "All ships," Subin broadcast, "execute Omega Protocol." The human fleet suddenly scattered in what looked like a random pattern. To alien observers, it appeared chaotic and undisciplined. But Subin knew better. Each ship was moving to a precisely calculated position. The devourers responded exactly as expected. They moved to exploit what appeared to be gaps in the human formation. But those gaps were traps. "Now," Subin ordered. The scattered human ships suddenly coordinated their fire. Focused energy beams struck the devourer formations from unexpected angles. 3 enemy ships exploded before they could adapt to the new tactic. "Commander," said Communications Officer Min Jae Park, We're receiving a message from Admiral Corksthon on the Council flagship. The main screen showed the familiar face of the hegemony warrior. Admiral Corksthon looked surprised and relieved. "Commander Kang," he said, "that was impressive. How did you predict their movement pattern?" "Experience," Subin replied. "We've been fighting the Devourers for 3 years. We've learned to think like they do." "Will you coordinate with our forces?" Corksthon asked. "We'll coordinate with you," Subin said. "But we won't take orders from you. Our ships, our tactics, our decisions." Admiral Corksthon nodded. "Agreed. What do you need from us? Stay out of our way and be ready to exploit the openings we create." Over the next 6 hours, the combined human-alien fleet engaged the Devourers in running battles across 3 star systems. The humans provided the flexibility and innovation. The aliens provided the firepower and resources. It was the first time in 3 years that a council force had achieved a decisive victory against the Devourers. Captain Wu Jinha stood on the bridge of his ship, indomitable spirit, watching his engineering team work miracles. His main weapons had been destroyed in the battle, but his crew was already improvising a solution. "Captain," said Chief Engineer Bo-Ra Kim, "we've rigged the mining charges to work with the cargo containers. It won't be pretty, but it should give us some offensive capability." "Do it," Wu Jin said. 20 minutes later, his ship launched a salvo of improvised weapons at a Devourer squadron. The alien machines had adapted to counter every known human weapon, but they had no defense against mining charges fired from cargo containers. 3 more Devourer ships were destroyed. Across Council space, similar scenes played out. Human engineers worked alongside alien technical teams, but now as equal partners. Human intuition combined with alien precision produced weapons and technologies that neither species could have created alone. Chief Engineer Dae-Hai Lim found herself working with a crystalline entity named Vextal. 3 years ago, Vextal had called human engineering methods inefficient and wasteful. Now he was learning to appreciate human creativity. "Your approach makes no logical sense," Vextal said as Dae-Hai rewired a plasma conduit using spare parts from 3 different ships. "But it works." "Logic isn't everything," Dae-Hai replied. "Sometimes you need to trust your instincts." The improvised weapon system they created together was more effective than anything either species had built separately. The turning point came at the Battle of Sigma Centauri. Admiral Hyunwoo Park, Kiwoo's younger brother, commanded a joint human-alien fleet in a desperate defense of the core worlds. The Devourers had sent their largest force yet, nearly 1,000 machine ships moving in perfect coordination. The defenders were outnumbered 5-1. "Admiral," said his tactical officer, "Council doctrine recommends withdrawal to secondary defensive positions." "Council doctrine will get us all killed," Hyunwoo replied. "We're going to try something different." Instead of fighting a traditional battle, Hyunwoo split his fleet into dozens of small groups. Each group used different tactics. Some engaged directly. Others struck and retreated. Still others focused on disrupting Devourer communications. The machine entities tried to adapt, but they could not adapt to 20 different strategies at once. While they were learning to counter one human tactic, 3 others were hitting them from unexpected directions. For the first time in the war, the Devourers were forced to retreat. Ambassador Min Seo-yoon stood in the restored Galactic Council chamber. The building had been damaged in a Devourer attack, but human engineers had helped repair it. The chamber looked the same as before, but the atmosphere was completely different. "The war is over," she announced to the assembled representatives. "The Devourers have been driven back beyond the galactic rim. Our combined fleets will maintain patrols to ensure they do not return." The alien delegates applauded, but it was subdued applause. They were grateful to be alive, but they were also ashamed of how they had treated their saviors. "Now we must discuss the future," Min Seo continued. "The Human Colonial Alliance has proven that we can survive and thrive independently. We do not need the Council, but we are willing to work with you if you are willing to work with us as equals." Supreme Counselor Rathvan stood to speak. His power had been broken during the war, and his hegemony was a shadow of its former self. "Ambassador Yoon," he said. "We acknowledge our errors. We acknowledge that we underestimated and mistreated your species. We formally request that humanity rejoin the Galactic Council as a full member with equal voting rights." "No," Mincio said simply. The chamber fell silent. "We will not rejoin the council as it was," Mincio continued. "But we are willing to help create something new. A galactic confederation where all species are equal, where decisions are made based on merit, not on claims of superiority." She gestured to a document on her podium. "This is the proposed Charter of the Galactic Confederation. It establishes equal representation for all member species. It prohibits discrimination based on origin or biology. It requires that all dangerous missions be voluntary, not assigned to lesser species. Most importantly, it recognizes that diversity of thought is a strength, not a weakness. That different approaches to problems make us all stronger." One by one, the alien delegates signed the charter. Some signed eagerly, grateful for a chance to make amends. Others signed reluctantly, knowing they had no choice. Dr. So-Young Lim returned to her research, but now she headed a joint institute where her chaotic methods were appreciated as breakthrough innovation. Engineer Dong Hyun Nam designed hybrid technologies that combined human adaptability with alien precision. Student researcher Na Young Shin worked in a mixed-species university where human creativity was valued alongside alien knowledge. Together, they developed technologies that promised a future where species complemented rather than competed. President Chang Min-an delivered humanity's first address to the new Galactic Confederation. "We never wanted to leave," he said. "We only wanted to be treated as equals. Today, the galaxy is stronger not because one species dominates, but because all species contribute their unique strengths." The universe changed forever the day humans left the Galactic Council. It learned that cooperation is stronger than domination, that diversity is more valuable than uniformity, that respect must be earned, not demanded. Kiwoo Park, now elderly, but still serving as humanity's senior ambassador, watched from the gallery as his daughter Min Jung addressed the Confederation. She had become a doctor, just as she had dreamed. But now she treated patients from dozens of species, using medical techniques that combined human intuition with alien science. "The galaxy has learned an important lesson," Min Jung said. "We are all stronger when we work together, but we can only work together as equals." The chamber erupted in applause. This time, it was genuine. Outside the chamber, construction crews worked to build new facilities for the Confederation. Human and alien workers labored side by side, combining their different strengths to create something neither could have built alone. In the distance, patrol fleets kept watch on the galactic rim. Human ships flew alongside alien vessels, ready to defend their shared civilization against any threat that might emerge from the void. The universe had indeed changed forever. It had learned that the species they had dismissed as primitive were actually the key to their survival. It had learned that strength came not from perfection, but from the ability to adapt and grow. And it had learned that sometimes the most advanced solution